Hello, good evening, and good morning, Dena ji.
Morning, good evening.
Under divine guidance of Pitamaha Patri ji, Mahavtar Baba ji, Ardhanarishwar energies, and unending love, the most unconditional love of Ma Narayani. I welcome you all to today's session with Dena ji, Sita's Yoga, Transformative Journey Within. Today, we go towards the third chapter, which is the yoga of inner transformation. With Devani, we travel within ourselves, connecting with Narayani, her energies, finding her within ourselves. And today, along with her, we transform our inner self. I welcome you, Denaji, to this platform, and the platform is all yours.
Thank you and welcome everyone. I actually look forward to being with you because it brings me back into Mata's world. A friend of mine just got the book and started reading it. He wrote me yesterday that he gets up at 4, and before his meditation he reads a chapter. And he said to me, I've entered Devani's world, and I feel like I'm living in her world. That was my experience when I was writing it, is I entered her world and I didn't want to leave that world. And so the trick is to carry that world with us, not to leave that world, to be in the presence of Mata and Sri Ram continually. So I thought I would begin by reading just sections of that chapter, just brief sections, and then reflecting on it. So at the beginning of the Yoga of Inner Transformation, Devani has had this experience of who Mata is. So she's gone through seeing her first as an inner presence and then her outer form, and then realizing she's the Maharani, and then realizing who she truly is. And Soma then brings her back and says to her, residues of your past still cling to you, and Mata is giving you opportunities to shed them. This is true for all of us. Residues of our past still cling to us, which is why we're here, why we've taken birth. And Mata is giving us opportunities to free ourselves from those residues. She goes on to say, you can fully awaken in this life. And in that awakening, many will benefit. For what happens on the individual level affects the whole. So our awakening affects the whole universe. It's not just for ourselves that we are seeking to free ourselves, because it will bring benefit to the rest of the whole. Then she goes on, universes spin and sing to the tune of the awakened ones in celebration of their return. For this purpose you have taken birth at this time, and when you return to Mata's world, you will be able to serve her in a different capacity, a more complete way. There are many on earth now who will awaken. That is one of the reasons for the birth of Ram and Sita, to call home those who are ready to return. The last remnants of earthly karma can only be completed here in this three-dimensional realm, and Mata and Sri Ram are facilitating that process for the many who have accompanied them into physical birth. Free yourself, Devani, and you will free many. Free yourself of the shadows that still lurk in your mind and block the radiance of the light within. Shadows of anger and fear, of all that separates yourself from her. Open yourself fully to her love, and it will ripple through the ethers, affecting all with whom you come in contact. Remember that whatever appears in the outer world has its origin in the mind. The outer is a reflection, a mere projection of what lies within. To free the outer world of darkness, you must first free your mind. Now, when I wrote this, I was struck by how similar it is to our current situation and how much she was speaking to us now. Because the world is filled with shadows of anger and fear, greed, hatred, the same things that Ravana was putting into the collective mind are being put into the collective mind today. And so, how are we talk about the polarization, we talk about the anger. What are we to do about that? There's actually a lot we can do about that, because if we clear our own mental landscape of those qualities, we're clearing a little part of the collective. And this turns the whole work back into oneself. I was very when I was writing this, I really had to look at what are the shadows that still lurk in my mind. And then I became more attentive every time anger arose, every time fear arose, every time greed arose. I had to look at them and say, that's a little bit of Ravana in me. And if I want to get rid of Ravana in the world, I have to get rid of that little bit that's within me. So this was very powerful to me when I wrote that. I kept, and it's a theme that continues throughout the book. But right here at the beginning, someone lays it out. Your work is with your mind. That's, and then she goes on. When you free your mind, you will know yourself to be none other than that supernal reality which you have now tasted. That is who Mata is, and that is who you are. So we are no different from her. So then Devani goes back to her village and she says, the experience bestowed on me in the forest that day remained with me for many weeks. Even during my busiest hours, I would often mentally transfer myself back to the forest and the exalted state I experienced there. And if that memory were to slip from my awareness, Soma's invisible presence would draw me back. She had become an extension of Mata herself, and I realized that this was my goal as well, to be an extension of Mata to the world, to let her love and power flow through me, to help whoever sought counsel and comfort, to offer service in whatever way they could receive. Now, here comes the tricky part. What I didn't perceive, however, were the subtle trappings of ego, how illusions can easily slip over one, like the enveloping mist that sometimes rises to greet the early morning hours. And I began erroneously to believe that the elevated experience in the forest that day was evidence of my advancement, and that my inner work was now complete. Such is the danger in soaring to lofty heights without being securely anchored, because unless one can bring that awareness to every detail of daily life, one has not achieved the goal. To see the divine hand in everything that comes, to hear the divine voice in all that is spoken, and to surrender to the divine will without any shadow of hesitation. These were the lessons I was yet to learn. This was also very powerful for me because so often we have gifts at the beginning or at intervals in our meditation, divine gifts. And as she says, not gifts not yet fully earned, perhaps not yet fully earned, but that's the grace of the divine who gives us an experience to encourage us, to inspire us to keep at it. Because one can say, well, nothing is happening. Why bother? Then we get these gifts to say, this is what lies ahead for you. You get a taste, and that inspires us to keep working. But the real work is in how we are moment to moment, how we are when we get up from meditation, how are we when we confront a challenge. And there's personal challenges in our life, our relationships, our work situation, health situations, things that we have to personally deal with. And then there are the collective challenges at the world level. And so you may handle well the personal challenges, but then you see what's going on in the world and you get angry or frustrated, fearful, whatever. And that's where we have to monitor our mental conditions, monitor our reactions. Because the minute we fall into any of those negative emotions, we're falling out of consciousness of the divine. We're falling into the illusions. And as we all know, Maya is very strong. If it doesn't get us one way, it will get us another way. If it's not through one thing, another thing will come up and we won't be paying attention. It's before you know it, you're into a whole chain of emotions. I wanted to pause here and hear some personal reactions or stories to how we can monitor our mental condition and become much more, because most of the time we slip into these emotions without being even conscious of it. It just happens as a natural reaction. And that's conditioning. You know, something happens in the world and we immediately react to it. There's a whole chapter there on the yoga of non-reaction, which we'll get to. But right here, it sets the foundation of how we are going to do the inner work. Meditation is one part, and then it's the monitoring of our mental states. So I want to open because I would like this to be a little bit more interactive. So we'll
Yes,
pause here
yes.
for some
Anyone,
reactions.
anyone who would like to share something about this personal experience? So I found this very interesting, Dena, that in this chapter, Soma is trying to tell Devani that there is a veil of emotions around you, and that is what is not allowing you to look into yourself and find your answers. But isn't it a paradox of human birth that we come in this human form to experience emotions, and at the same time, we also want to get rid of certain emotions?
Yes, okay, so that's a very good question. You know, after this, after Devani has this realization, what happens to her? Weeks after my meeting with Soma in the forest, a great trial descended on our community, one that hit my family particularly hard. So she's confronted with a challenge. She reacts. There's a very troublesome couple that causing problems. Her family's being harmed. She gets angry. But then what happens to her? She sees it's not until she gets the whole picture does her emotion do her emotions change. So there's the woman Puri, who's a big part of the story, who's very challenging for her, who's got lots of issues. But when she goes back into the past and sees her relationship with her, it gives her a whole different understanding. And uh, and then she sees the future. So there's the past and there's the future, and we're a sliver with on our current we're a sliver between past and future. So I look at troublesome figures on the world scene, and I say to myself, okay, what's motivating? Where was that person before? There's a past. That person had a past that led them to this condition, and that person is going to have a future. They're creating their future now, which is not an enviable one. Does that so it sort of awakens compassion when you see the unenviable future that lies ahead for that troublesome figure, but still you're in the present. In other words, you have a consciousness of the past and of the future while being in the present. So in the present, you have to act, and one can act without holding on to anger or hatred. One can act from that place. And of course, that gets talked about later in the book, how one deals with righteous anger. Um, how and there are examples, from Sita's life, and there's also the example of Parvati when she, got angry at all the suffering and injustice, and Shiva has to come lay himself in front of her to bring her back. So these are real issues that we confront, and it's a very delicate balance of how you work with the emotions so that you're not getting trapped in the illusion and that you're seeing the whole picture. And that's something that Sita helps Devani do, is to see the past and the future. And that changes the whole perspective. If you see somebody, I mean, once you see Puri's past, you can understand more of her life and you can have compassion on her. And even holding on to that compassion is a challenge for Devani. So, what we get to experience through these chapters is Devani's own growth, how she has the same human emotions that we have, anger at injustice, and trying to find a way to provide service within that context. So, she actually remains a loyal friend of this woman who's causing such distress to her family. Not many of us are called to do that. That's sort of an extreme example, of having to befriend someone who's such a troublesome figure. But we have minor examples of that. And unfortunately, most of us can't see the past, so we can't understand what the origin of that was, of that situation was. But just knowing that there is a backstory, I think that's one of the most important lessons that comes through is just knowing that there's a backstory. You may know that conceptually, but really understanding that there are causes that led to this situation. And as I was writing this, I had to apply that to not so much my personal life, but the collective life of my country, which is undergoing a real trial right now, and understand that there are karmic conditions that led to this current situation. And it's the undoing. How do we counter those negative karmic conditions, which we'll get to later on. But for right now, I think the most important thing is the monitoring, is being aware, because before you can address a situation, you have to be aware of it. So to know what your shadow is it anger? Are you quick to anger? Is it judgment? Are you quick to judge? Is it greed? Do you have trouble controlling the desires even when they're things that you don't need? Things, do the wants keep multiplying? You have to know what your work is. What are the residues that you need to free yourself from? And it's going to be different for everybody. And that's nobody can tell you because nobody has except the divine ones can see inside of you, can see into your mind and know what thoughts arise. But becoming aware of your inner mental condition is really the first step toward inner transformation and identifying which traits you want to work through in this life so that you don't carry them in the future. What are the residues you want to free yourself from? In the future, you'll be free of those. You won't be carrying them.
Yes, Dena. It is mostly the awareness, and like you said, sometimes we just flow in the emotions without even realizing that we are completely in the emotions and not realizing that what is the truth at that moment, because we are reacting through those emotions and not through the bigger truth, which is. And awareness is the key, which I think always helps. Personally, in I have found myself, it was, I think it is still a journey, and initially it would be after 2 days I would realize that, oh my god, I was angry, and it was like that. But later on, the 2 days became lesser and lesser and lesser, and now sometimes it happens that even before going into anger, I realize that, okay, I'm going into anger right now. Why am I then? I think that's a practice of awareness that helps us reaching there, and it's a continuous practice, which we all need to sort of do, I guess, until we absolutely get rid of all the, um, I don't want to call it as negative emotions. um,
It's it's yeah, finding the word for it. I mean, it disturbs one's harmony. It disturbs to be in either anger or fear or greed or any of those emotions that disturb one's unity, one's harmony, and increase the separation. Really, it separates one from the divine, and so. Finding the right words, negative in that what is negative? I don't use the word evil anymore because what is evil? Everything has a purpose, and sometimes what we call quote quote evil is for the purpose of awakening. It shocks you into a new understanding. So I don't use that term. But things that if something arises, something comes into your way that awakens anger, the purpose of that is for you to notice that, is to make and to respond in a more nuanced way, to respond in a way, because what is that about? Why are you angry?
Usually, what is outside is what's inside is reflected outside. Like here,
Get
she
outside.
says,
So yes, exactly, which is a very important thing to remain. I mean, all the greed that we see in the world now, that I mean, this reflection of our collective, so we all have bits of that within us. We all have bits of anger within us. Maybe some people are very slow to anger, but as long as there's that bit of it within us, so I think it's important for people for us to realize that we are part of the collective, and that what we are experiencing is adding to that collective. So it puts a different sense of responsibility on us, because we see how damaging to the world all the anger is, all the hatred that's being spewed out there on social media and etc. How damaging it is to the well-being of society, and to the planet. And so the more we can refrain from adding to that, and not only that, but countering it, which we'll get into later when we talk about the yoga of generosity. There are there's ways to pour in loving collective energy into the collective. So we're adding energy to the collective no matter what. Either it's going to be a adding to the beneficial or to the harmful. So whether we don't have to call it negative, we can call it harmful, because anger is harmful. It's a
yes.
form of violence, actually. And we know when it takes a action, that's clearly a form of violence. People shoot each other, they do whatever. Even verbally, it's a form of violence, because you're hurting somebody. What's harder to discern is even mentally, it's a form of violence
Mm-hmm.
when you think something harmful about somebody mentally. And that's it gets subtle, and that's very hard. That's the hardest thing to control. Now, by control, I don't mean suppress, because that's not really what we're seeking to do, to suppress these emotions. It's really, once it's neutralizing them, and when you can only really do that by knowing that there's a bigger picture, and
Yes.
that I heard, I think I may have mentioned this last time we spoke. A devotee told me something, or I heard recently from a devotee, that someone once asked Babaji, "Why are you allowing all this horrible stuff to going on in the world?" Did I say this last time?
Yes, yes, you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, my role is not to suppress negative, but to increase the light, not to suppress the darkness, but to. So I don't know whether he actually said that, but it's a wonderful guideline for us, that our role is to increase the light.
Yes.
And by increasing the light, you are reducing the power of the darkness, so to speak. Whether we call it negative, darkness, whatever, harmful, it's those emotions that cause suffering, really. So just by concentrating on increasing the positive emotions, and by the light, we're already helping. And everything, and the other thing he said is that in the world of duality, there's always going to be polarity, light
Yes.
and darkness. But the darkness can't overtake the light. And if there's no darkness, everything just gets absorbed back into the divine. It's what keeps the whole play going. And the play is not ready yet to end. The play still has many more eons to go.
Yes, very true. Um, can I ask you a question here, which is little further in this chapter? You did mention that Devani projects herself. She gets a dream of a future, and the new book which you were working on, which you kept aside to work on Sita's yoga, that also is a book where you project yourself 200 years from today. So I just had this thought, and I was wondering that How can one project one's consciousness in future just by intention? That's first one. And the second question is, uh, future is always a probability.
Right.
So how do we know for sure?
So this becomes clearer as you enter different stages in life, and as you enter the elder years, your future is closer. And you, at a soul level, are already setting the blueprint.
Yes.
And you can tell what that is. You can see once you pass through a certain, you go through the ashramas, different stages of life, right? You're a brahmachari, you're a householder, then you're, peak of your work, and then you begin to withdraw. By that time, you've seen that you've fulfilled certain things that you came in to do, certain things that were determined by your last birth. I've written a book about my previous birth called My Journey Through Time, where I met Yogananda very briefly toward the end of my life and wanted to follow him to America, but I couldn't get out of war-torn Europe. And so I died there. But my intention and what happens in those last years is very important, was to follow him and to learn meditation and to, begin to seriously uh, 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 pursue my sadhana. And then I got born and found him very young in this life. So already the intention was set at the end of my last life. Well,
Correct.
I already find myself not necessarily consciously, but unconscious, but I'm aware of setting the intention for my next birth. I see my next birth. I see my parents. I see where I'll be born. I see the fundamentals of that life. Now there are things that can change, and when I came back from India this time, I thought I'd go back to that book, and then another book emerged that came in the way. So it's again been put on hold. And I said to myself, why does this book about the future keep being postponed? And then I thought, because there are certain things that are still in process.
Right.
But if you look carefully at your aspirations, what have you not fulfilled in this life? What's still left for you to do? You know that lies in your future. Anything that's not yet been fulfilled is part of your future.
Yeah.
And if you have fulfilled all of those things, but have not sort of still have that desire to serve the divine and call upon the divine to help you find a way to best provide that service, then the elements of a future life begin to take place.
Okay.
I will go into that more in that book when I do finally come around. It's halfway done when I come around to writing it, because the future that I see is a much better one than the current reality of today on our earth, which is why I projected 200 years, because it doesn't mean that the next few decades are going to be easy ones, but we're moving along in the upward swing of the yugas, and new formations will take place, and it will be a more dharmic society. But that's a practice that one can do, because you either unconsciously set your future or you consciously set it.
Yes.
Just like our past determined the conditions of our current birth, we are in our life setting the conditions for the future, and we can do it consciously or it happens unconsciously.
Absolutely.
So, David, because she was an awakened soul, uh, she could see into the future.
Hmm. Yeah.
And she could see that even though Sita was going to free her of rebirth through karmic compulsion. I mean, we either are reborn because of unfinished karma, or we're reborn solely to serve. And until we free ourselves from all these past residues, we'll keep coming back to fulfill what's unfulfilled, to continue to perfect ourselves. And then there comes a choice. You stay in the astral realm, and there's actually reincarnation between the causal and the astral realms. Once souls have freed themselves of earthly physical karma and can remain in the astral world, they go back and forth between the subtler, even subtler world and the astral world. But those are souls who are freed of rebirth here. And then there are those who the Buddhists call bodhisattvas who who choose to come back to help the others who are left here working through their earth karma. May not come back so quickly. I mean, 500 years could pass before you return. That's really solely by choice.
How can one know that if karma is, sorry, you were reading something?
How can you know if karma is resolved?
Yeah.
Well, I think introspection is the key. And introspection maybe starts out with just looking at your mental play, what's going on mentally? What are the emotions? But as you go deeper, you can see what desires are still lurking there that are
Mm.
maybe quiet whispers, you know. I wish I had a better relationship. I wish I had done this with my career instead of that. I wish my husband had been more successful. Whatever. Um,
Yeah.
lurking whispers. And once you sort of become more focused on your mind, you can go deeper into those subtle whispers that are not yet fulfilled. Uh, it's part of the sadhana, you know. And of course, there could be things that are very buried that we can't know,
Mm.
and we have to just. But the more you purify the mind, the more we do sadhana. Meditation is a very important tool with this because you're aligning yourself with the divine. The more we uh, uh, um, sort of enhance our spiritual life, I think there are practices that actually neutralize samskara. Like when you work with pranayama, you work in the kundalini in the spine, the seeds of our unexpressed desires are sort of buried there, and you can bring them out. And so there are practices to help expedite the process.
Yes, very true. Um,
So I just want to go through a few more just brief. As we walk through life, our deeds, words, and thoughts create imprints in the ether for what will come as we unknowingly begin to design successive births. So it's our deeds, our words, and our thoughts that are creating imprints, samskara, that begin to design our future. These imprints can be moderated and changed through the conscious use of our will. But most of us sleepwalk into the future without realizing the power we hold. So that's I think this answers the question. These imprints can be moderated and changed through the conscious use of our will. You know, one of the impacts of meditation is the strengthening of the will. My guru used to choose the most difficult astrological times in his chart, things where there were going to be a lot of challenges, and choose very hard tasks for himself to accomplish during that time. He was testing his will, strengthening his will. So he'd say, okay, I've got all these obstacles in my chart, and he chooses a very difficult task and he works to ensure it. That was his way. He was very big on willpower, on strengthening the will. And, we can do that in many, I mean, we choose little tasks for ourselves. I'm going to fast for a day. Well, that's a way of strengthening the will. I'm going to fast for 3 days. That's a way. I'm going to meditate for 3 hours. You're using your willpower because after an hour you say, okay, well, I'm going to get up. I'm restless. I'm going to get up. But with the willpower, you say, no, I'm going to stay there. And then after 2 hours, well, you're restless. I'm going to get up. I have all these things to do, but through willpower. So there are many ways that you can cultivate willpower. This my guru felt was a very important asset on the spiritual path, increasing your willpower, because it enables you to resist all the things that pull you from so many directions in the world. And to the conscious use of our will, we can direct our future. So, we can't change the past. We are shaping our future. Nobody's doing it for us. We are the ones that shape our future, unconsciously or consciously. That's the choice we have.
Very true.
It was then when, no, imagine that. Imagine that. So Devani then begins to see the future where Puri becomes her devoted devotee. Now, if you think of the most troubled person in the world or in your life, if you see that they're going to be your devotee in the future, completely devoted to you with love, and you judge them very differently.
Yes.
And in a way, that's I mean, it's an exercise we can do to help us overcome, it's so overcome our reactions, but also it's a truth to see that anybody we don't know. I mean, all these relationships we have, and we're going to be in relationship with so many people, you know, and if you see a future relationship, somebody you can't get along with now, somebody who's caused your boss is causing you so much trouble, could be your beloved husband in the future or wife. And so, if you see all the possibilities, it changes the way you react, and then you're opening yourself to all the different possibilities, and it changes your perspective. So that was how Devani was able to overcome. She was repulsed by this woman because this woman was such a nasty woman. She had repulsion toward her. After her first meeting with her, she threw up. She was she was so affected by her. But once she saw the past and the suffering this woman had, and then she saw the future, that they're going to have this beautiful relationship in the future, well, how can she not work toward helping her move toward that beautiful future?
Dena ji, just being mindful of the time. We've already 40 minutes in. Do you have some more time? 10 minutes?
Yes, and I do want to end with a meditation. So I just want
Yes.
to, she said, I emerged from meditation in a state of wonder after seeing both the past and the future. It, all of us would have that, a state of wonder. If we saw the whole picture, we would be in a state of wonder. So she still has work to do. Uh, the problems in the village are ongoing. And she said, the mind often takes circuitous routes before finding its path forward. And so my mind went back and forth between retreat and engagement. I had opinions for sure, but I wasn't so attached to my opinions, telling myself that perhaps there was a greater picture that I couldn't see. That was a very important phrase to me. I had opinions for sure, but I wasn't so attached to my opinions. And then she has another experience. of Ram and Ram and Sita, and she hears the words, "When you transcend anger and judgment and all sense of self-righteousness, then you become an effective counterbalance. When your heart is purified, working only for the collective good, then you know how to act." Those words were the counsel I needed. Over the course of time since meeting Mata in the flesh, I had experienced a deep inner change where I had to examine my inner landscape and see the remnants of emotions from which I sought to free myself. Okay, so that's the work of all of us to find the emotions we want to seek to free ourselves from. So if there are no questions or comments, then we can have a 10-minute meditation.
I think there is a question in the chat box. Vinny ji, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. How to go back to see the past? Are there some tips so that we can go and see the past and clear the residues in order to clear the what you say, the anger, the greed, the whatever the negative we are carrying? Because definitely the seeds are from the past. So in order to clear, some tips to go back and see.
Ask me that all the time. How can I see my past? And I don't have an answer for that. I think that there are reasons why we don't see the past. For example, in the book, Puri had done a terrible deed in her earlier life, and having that memory would have been very painful. So we suppress our memories. So and also I think it could be confusing. I think that along the way one sees what one needs to see, and I think just knowing that there's a backstory, knowing that whatever this difficulty is, there's a backstory to it. There's a reason why. So even though it's helpful to see what that backstory is, just knowing that there's a cause that led to that, and you don't want to carry that into the future. You want to resolve it. So it's helpful to see the past. It's helpful to see the future. But if one can't force it. In other words, if it doesn't come organically, you can't you can't pry it open. It has to arise organically. And I don't know why. I mean, I've been able to see a lot of my past. I don't know exactly why. I think it's for sharing. I think the fact that I've been able to write about it has helped other people, because a lot more people now, even especially in the West, understand that we have a long history behind us, whereas that wasn't true until recently, where people understand that reincarnation is a reality. And so I think that I've been able to see for the sharing. But people have told me that they've had glimpses. Many people get inclinations. Once you become mindful of your inner life, there are subtle hints, inclinations, where you may not see a whole story, get the whole narrative, but you have some kind of intuitive knowing of what took place before. So there's no technique that I can give you to say this will help you understand the past or see the past. But I think that it's being attentive to the hints. And one way is to strengthen your intuition, to really, now how that's probably a whole nother discussion of how to develop your intuition, because intuition is critical. And in the higher yugas, we in recent times have focused on the rational mind. In the higher yugas, the rational mind was less active, the intuitive mind was much more active. And I think one of the things now, what we need to do is focus on cultivating that intuition, the intuitive mind. It gives us access to much more information.
Okay.
And
Yes.
so, I think we should have a whole discussion on ways that we can, just like I mentioned, certain ways to develop your willpower. There are ways to cultivate your intuition.
I was going to ask you about that because here Devani says in this chapter that she questions her inner voice and she asks that did I misunderstand my inner voice? So that was a question which I was going to ask you another time. Maybe we can discuss about that how we ensure that the inner voice or the intuition we are receiving is true, and how we can refine it so that the intuition comes easily to us without any resistance.
I think that's a very important question. And, early on when I was having all my experiences of my past, I questioned myself and checked out what I was seeing. I went to places that I saw. And so I think how do we know that what we're intuiting is in line with the truth? Maybe hold on to that question.
Yes.
Hold on to that question because that's a very important one.
Yes, maybe next time.
Next
And
time.
yeah, and your gift about seeing your past is the gift to humanity. And we are so much grateful to you for your gift and you choosing to share with all of us.
That it makes me happy if I feel it's been helpful. If any of my writings are helping people, then that's all I seek to do. If it can help you attune more deeply with your inner self, or with Mata or Sri Ram, then it's well served. We have about 10 minutes.
Yes,
If there's no more questions or comments, we can go into meditation.
surely. Yes.
Okay, about 10 minutes. And I'll just end the meditation with a brief Om.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just go into meditation by reading the last lines of this chapter. You can fully awaken in this life, and in that awakening, many will benefit. For what happens on the individual level affects the whole. So let us be conduits for Mata, vehicles for her, arms and legs to do her work, a voice to speak her truth, a heart to spread her love, so that we become an extension of her, just as Soma was.
Thank you, Dena ji, for your time, wonderful presence, and guidance. Thank you, everyone, for joining here today. Let's meet again in few days.
See you next time.